Welcome back, folks, to the Weather Center. Today is June 11th, 2025. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your Wednesday hump day, halfway through the week, to join me here in the Weather Center for your latest tropical update. If you're brand new to the channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button, giving that like button a little nudge. As always, you guys have been fantastic with that over the last several tropical updates. I can't thank you enough for your continued support, and thank you so graciously for relying on me for trustworthy, reliable, and accurate tropical weather outlooks as we continue through the 2025 hurricane season. We've got a lot of updates coming at you, so please share this information to those you believe would benefit from it, and leave me a comment down below upon the conclusion of this video. If you have any questions or you just want to let me know where you're tuning in from, say hello. I'm always willing to strike up conversation with everybody out there. So I'm not going to waste everyone's time. Let's just jump right in. We have a lot to discuss, and I want to get through it in a timely fashion. First and foremost, Eastern Pacific still stealing all the action. Cosme is now a remnant post-tropical low pressure, still with a central pressure as of the last advisory first thing this morning of 1,007 millibars, sustained winds at only 35 miles an hour. This thing is a dead stick out there in the Eastern Pacific, and it is nothing more than a very sloppy setup of clouds and a lot of dry air thanks to wind shear helping to erode this system pretty much all together. We have another area now. EP93, Invest 93E, an area of disorganized showers and thunderstorms located several hundred miles south of the Gulf of Tehuantepec, is associated with a broad area of low pressure. Code red for this puppy. In 48 hours, we have a 50% shot this tries to organize into Delilah, a 90% shot over the next 7 days. This becomes our next named system. And then another disturbance right behind that with the token 0 for 20 split. No chance of development over the next 2 days, but a 20% shot over the next 7 days, and we're going to continue to watch that. Now, the Atlantic, same song and dance. Nothing has changed yet, but we have had a couple of indicators come up throughout the day today, and over the last 48 hours, I would say. I didn't really air it out too heavily on Monday because confidence was still fairly low, but we have a signal. We definitely have a signal. It isn't anything glaring, and it isn't anything worrisome, at least for us here in the United States. I'll talk you through that here momentarily. First, let's take a broad look outside at the infrared full disk satellite shot. The Atlantic is getting beaten up by this strong area of subtropical ridging, our Bermuda Azores high. The North Atlantic Oscillation remains in a fairly excited state, trying to come down ever so slightly, and I think maybe our models are finally starting to adjust for that, and that's why even the European model, the control European model, or I should say the operational model, not the ensembles, but the operational model is finally starting to get with the program. ITCZ looking a little bit more healthy out there. You can kind of see a bit of a kink in it during the central MDR. Tropical waves still continue to move across that area. We have one working its way through the Windward Islands right now, another one getting ready to come off of Africa, and a couple of weak perturbations embedded within that pattern. Still some pretty good thunderstorm action near Costa Rica, Panama, portions of Nicaragua and Honduras, and the northwestern and western extent, I should say now, of Colombia. Venezuela and the Guyana is also getting in on a lot of the thunderstorm action associated with that tropical wave. You can kind of get a good idea of how strong the wind shear is still out there, though. You look at the thunderstorms blowing up over parts of Cuba, maybe getting into the Cayman Islands, Jamaica, seeing some interior showers and storms. Same thing with Hispaniola, especially the west side near Haiti. Puerto Rico, look at how the thunderstorms ignite and they're very quickly ripped off towards the right. You can see the tops of those thunderstorms on the infrared immediately move back towards the east thanks to that westerly shear that is still cranking out there. Here in the southeast, we've got a lot of disturbed weather going on. Even here in Central Florida, on my way home from News 6 today, lots of thunderstorms out there, some gusty winds associated with that. It looks like Tampa, all the way down to just south of Fort Myers, Punta Gorda, is being hammered by our afternoon thunderstorms. Here is our latest invest out there, a very broad spin, and then we're going to be watching just upstream of that for the next area of disturbed tropical action to try to wander its way through. Let's take a look at the true color visible satellite shot. Let me get myself out of the picture. And if you look very closely, it might be a bit difficult to discern, at least at first glance, but this whole thing here, more or less, is Invest 93E. You can kind of see where it looks to be a very broad area of low pressure trying to form to the immediate south of Mexico, right about there, the bottom left corner of this grid box here. Like I said, it's a little difficult to identify. I had to zoom it out and look at the true color visible to see exactly where this thing could be spinning. Because if I switch us back to the infrared, you'll notice immediately you can't find it. It's almost dang well impossible to locate anything outside of the very, very sloppy showers and thunderstorms trying to form up around it and slowly but surely deepen that area of low pressure. So this is something we're going to watch. Definitely shows good levels of confidence across our global models and the ensembles that this will become our next tropical storm. It could make a run for Category 1 intensity, but I really do think the Eastern Pacific, with the configuration of the sea surface temperatures and the fact that this is simply a pulse of the MJO, we're not going to get any major long tracking, let alone very strong tropical cyclones out of this setup. They've almost been very pulse-like you would see with your typical daytime thunderstorms. They flare up and rain out. Very similar to that. If you all recall and think about Alvin to Barbara to Cosme, they've been very, okay, they kind of blow up. They don't quite rapidly intensify, but they do strengthen at a fairly decent pace, and then they wash out almost immediately after they hit peak intensity. And I think that's going to be the repetition we follow in the Eastern Pacific. And I have a theory on that as well, because the Atlantic is still crickets. But I do think if we continue to get our named storms to fire up out there, eventually the warmest waters on that side of the basin, the tropical Pacific, there's only that one cluster of 28, 29, 30 plus degree Charlie temperatures before you're surrounded by the cooler anomalies. The more storms we get to fire this early on, I think maybe from a thermodynamic perspective, we're going to see this activity slow down, and then we'll really start to favor some of the Atlantic side of things to get us off the ground and possibly produce Andrea over the coming weeks. Here's the latest from CPC in terms of their global tropics hazards. You can see the Bay of Campeche is still highlighted for that above 20%. And then after that, between June 25th and the 1st of July, the Eastern Pacific, they are holding that very aggressive signal, and the rest of us here in the Atlantic sees that completely tick away. So we're going to have to continue to watch that. Here's our afternoon ensemble update from the Euro. You can see we are still seeing a bona fide signal for tropical depression formation in the Eastern Pacific. That's to be expected. We still have a very enhanced phase of the MJO pretty much sitting right overhead. It hasn't gone anywhere just yet. We're starting to get that propagation. It is June 11th, and over the next 3 to 4 days, it will pass on from the East Pac, cross over Central America, and then get into our neighborhood. So it's game time. It's now or never, more or less. If we don't get a signal, if we don't see anything start to trend, it's over for the month of June, I do believe. And our next shot is going to be sometime early July, kind of around the 4th of July timeframe, Independence Day, ironically. You can see a pretty decent uptick in the signaling for the Bay of Campeche, right up against the coastline of Mexico, and then towards the very tail end of the run, we're still monitoring the Southern Caribbean for what looks to be another tropical wave trying to work its way through the pattern. Now, very briefly, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because it's only been a couple of model runs. This is the very first of the Euro itself that has really shown a distinct circulation center in the model data. You can see it right there. It comes across the Yucatan Peninsula just outside of southern Mexico and then begins to try to bubble up before crashing inland immediately into eastern Mexico as a rainmaker, possibly a very disorganized PTC. Could be very reminiscent of what we saw with Tropical Storm Chris, the 6 to 12-hour tropical cyclone, just to check a box. We'll have to wait and see. This is only one model run, and the Euro ensembles don't quite do very much with it, so I'm still very skeptical as to whether or not this sticks, but as mentioned in previous tropical updates, this could very well be the adjustment in the PNA trying to back off some, and especially the North Atlantic oscillation, weakening that pressure gradient, relaxing a bit of the winds out there for something to lift up over open water. The GFS isn't doing anything outlandish. I immediately clicked over in the same exact date and time, more or less. You can see whereabouts in that same geographic point in the Bay of Campeche, the Western Gulf, we have an area of tropical rotation. Could be a tropical storm, could be Tropical Storm Andrea. It's still early on, but we're definitely going to be watching this. We could get some heavier rainfall up into southern and central Texas as a result of this if it decides to manifest itself. We're probably going to see our rain chances go up regardless over the next 7 days, give or take. But now we're going to have to see what our models do in terms of how they ebb and flow with our pattern over North America, the Gulf, back down with the Central American gyre, and across the majority of the Atlantic basin. You can see right here, the temperatures are at their greatest point right about in there. You can see we pretty much mimic the Eastern Pacific. And in fact, if you look very closely here, you can kind of see right there a little corridor of where the water temperatures have subsided ever so slightly as a result of the number of back-to-back tropical cyclones we've had in the Eastern Pacific already. So this is what I was talking about. If you notice, we're starting to see more of the deeper shades of red through the Gulf, through the Western Caribbean, into the Southern Caribbean, more so than the Eastern Pacific. So we might start to see a little bit of a thermodynamic biasing to the other side of both of our oceans, let alone the bodies of water out there. We'll have to wait and see. Again, it's just a working theory. On top of that, we have a new forecast from Colorado State University. I'll go ahead and pull it over into view for you all to see. This is a graphic I made for a web article over on clickorlando.com. And if you notice, for their June outlook, the updated forecast, they haven't changed anything. Still going above average with 17 total named storms. 9 of those could potentially become hurricanes. And of those 9 hurricanes, we could see stronger than Category 3 or Category 3 or greater, making them major hurricanes. Max sustained winds needing to be at 111 miles an hour or higher than that. I also went ahead and made this graphic as well. The probabilities for a close shave for us here in Central Florida. And I know, forgive me, you have a lot of folks out there who watch elsewhere. This was for the Click Orlando article for us here in the Sunshine State. Holding steady with a 92% shot, a named storm, a tropical storm or stronger, passes within 50 miles of us. 65% chance of a hurricane, 74 miles an hour or greater, coming within 50 miles of the state of Florida. And the reason I bring this up, I wanted to do a bit of a short-winded explanation on this. Yes, this is the forecast for 2025. Is this 100% saying 92% chance we get a tropical storm this close to Florida? No. I would argue that 8/10 out of 9/10, 9 out of 10, these probabilities are rooted in statistical and historical data. Because the state of Florida juts out like a sore thumb, naturally we have a much greater probability of seeing this close of a shave from a tropical system as opposed to the likes of Texas maybe, or Georgia, for example, or the Northeast United States. Your probabilities are just that much greater given where we are on the map. Now, a smaller sliver of this is in fact rooted in seasonal data, the climate models, long-range computer models indicating what our steering currents could look like out there. So it's definitely not something to look away from, but it's not something to say, okay, we have a 92% shot of a landfall this hurricane season. It's happening. Even back in different years where Florida didn't see any landfalls, we were naturally very elevated because of the fact through the years since we started to track these things, the probabilities of seeing something close, if not directly overhead, are much higher than different parts of, the coastal United States. So let me get these out of the way. We did get an update on our analogs. We have 1996. I'll go ahead and get myself out of the way here so we can quickly walk through these together. The 1996 hurricane season is their first analog, followed by 1999. This was the year, I believe, of Hurricane Floyd. I distinctly remember tracking that hurricane with my dad and preparing for some potential impacts here in the state of Florida. Notice a lot of the action does mimic where we're thinking our hotspots could possibly be. Bay of Campeche system, a little sloppy system working its way in there with one southern Texas landfall near the Brownsville, Corpus Christi area. A couple Florida landfalls and then scraping right up against the East Coast. The Bahamas are a hotspot of ours as well. Taking a look at 2008, kind of a mixed bag. This would flow very well with folks who are big fans of the LRC, the Lezax recurring cycle, indicating the Gulf to its entirety could be a hotspot. But again, the East Coast, the Mid-Atlantic, up the eastern seaboard, and the state of Florida remain a highly impactful spot just based on this analog. Obviously, we're not predicting landfalls here, but I'm just looking at where the activity is in comparison to where we've mentioned and kind of speculated together as a community where our landfall hotspots could be. Then we have 2011, a lot of action out there across the greater Atlantic, a lot of recurving, very similar to 2023, still coming in close proximity to the Bahamas Bahamas, the Turks and Caicos, Greater Antilles are going to have to pay attention if this were to be a possible solution, and then some slop out there in the Western Caribbean and the Bay of Campeche. And then last but not least, this has been a change. 2021, a very active hurricane season with a lot of subtropical action as well, I might add, as a final analog per CSU, which still, once again, lines up with where we have internalized some of our landfall sites, our landfall hotspots, if you will, for the Weather Center channel here. You know, we've been talking about this since January, February, March. Central and Eastern Gulf, Western Florida, up the East Coast near the Carolinas, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Northeast U.S., as well as the Greater Antilles. So you can tell that they are on the same wavelength as we have been, so it's nice to have a bit of a sanity check from one of the more official sources, or one of the most official sources out there. And then finally, one thing I want to bring up before we get ready to close out the video is the difference in their data. I thought this was very interesting. Let me get my face out of the way one more time, and then we will close out. I apologize for running so long, but this stuck out to me. This is their April outlook, the data, the numbers basically, at the top here using their different computer model suites that they'll then compile into their final forecast. This is June, and I'm going to change the color of the ink because I want you to notice something. Look at the statistical scheme total storms. It's gone up by about 2, if not almost arguably 3 named storms. Now, the Euro, being fairly frugal, hasn't changed very much. The UK Met has gone up by 2 named storms. The JMA has gone up by a named storm. The Canadian has dropped 2 named storms, but the overall analog scheme, their analog years put together, have gone up 2 named storms. They still kept their forecast at around 17 because obviously these individual computer model suites are going to have their biases. They're also honing in on more representative conditions to what's out there right now in terms of sea surface temperatures, 850, 700 millibar wind anomalies, looking at the trade winds and the pressure centers over the Atlantic, what the state of the ENSO is in right now, as well as where we're going through the peak months of the hurricane season. Another thing that's shot up, notably, and I say shot up because last hurricane season we barely squeaked in there, are the ACE units here. We went from 170 even back in their April outlook to 178, which both, regardless, put us into that hyperactive threshold. We're just kind of squeaking to the higher end of the spectrum, and you can see the overall net tropical cyclone activity has also gone up to 193 total units. So I thought this was very interesting, given the current state of the environment and why Dr. Phil Klotzbach himself, when we've spoken during prior interviews, and I'm going to kind of re-engage with him on that as well to talk more about this, he emphasizes we should put a little more energy into the June outlook than the April outlook because we're beyond the ENSO predictability barrier. We're closer in time to what it is we're forecasting for. So all in all, when you look at the big picture, there is a higher level of skill. Obviously, we're still not close to August, September, and October, but we're 2 months closer. So naturally, you're going to see an increase in the forecast accuracy and the forecast skill as opposed to an additional 60 days in the past when they first generated their initial outlook for 2025. And that's that. We got a little bit of a signal out there for the Bay of Campeche. Doesn't look like anything alarming. Could be a nasty rainmaker for our friends out there in Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula, portions of Belize and El Salvador as it works its way up. Or it could possibly stay bullied down into the Eastern Pacific and become their next named storm. It looks like projections could make it all the way to their F-named storm, that one being Flossie in the Eastern Pacific before things possibly start to trend down. We're also looking at a whole new setup in terms of numbers from Colorado State University. Stand by on if I can get another interview or at least a casual sit-down conversation with Dr. Klotzbach himself, and I'll be sure to relay all that to you wonderful viewers here in the Weather Center. And we'll see you next time. Thank you all so much if you've stuck with me through this bit of a long-winded update. I wanted to cover the CSU update as well as what's going on out there in the tropics real time. So bear with me. I know I've kept it at about 10 to 14 minutes on average. We're pushing 20 this time, but a lot of information I've tried to compile for you all in one fell swoop. So you guys have been a fantastic community. It's great to have you all rocking with me for this hurricane season. We're 11 days out of the 180 days, give or take, deep. There's still a lot of hurricane season left. And one last thing, remember, There is absolutely no correlation, no connection, no whatever you want to call it, merging or crossing of the beams with early activity and late activity in terms of what the entire hurricane season looks like. A lot of folks out there are thinking this is going to be a dud. June ain't doing anything for us, so this hurricane season is over. Remember, folks, that's a very, very fatal mistake you can make. Now, I'm not saying it's for sure going to be hyperactive, above average. The storms are going to start popping any moment now, but I just want to remind you before we get lulled into, we're only 11 days in, there is no connection to early season activity with the duration of the hurricane season. Like last year, we had Alberto, Beryl, Chris. Beryl was the record-setting Cat 5. It paid no correlation, no dividends to the peak of the hurricane season. There was a lot of dead space out there, so there is no connection. What happens early on does not summarize what the entirety of the hurricane season will look like. So thank you all so much for sticking around. I really, really do appreciate every single one of you who make our weather-centric community fantastic. It's all thanks to you. You motivate me to stay on camera, keep bettering myself as a meteorologist for everybody, and I will not stop providing you with the accurate, no-nonsense, and reliable tropical weather, any type of weather forecast that you all rely on and count on day to day to keep you and your loved ones ahead of the worst that Mother Nature can throw at us. We'll talk to you again very soon, but until next time, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.